This is actually very exciting. We saved this very important big panel for the end because this whole last piece we're framing as an action training. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk to folks about a variety of different levels on how to achieve some of the things that folks are talking about, how to start. And we're going to try and start on sort of a basic beginner one-on-one level and sort of grow out from there, from, individual conversations to more social movement to political structures to everything else in between. We're going to save lots of time for answering your questions. I feel like we have a lot of people on stage, and it would actually be I could introduce each of them, but it might actually just make more sense. If you all want to say just a little bit about who are you, how did you end up on a panel, do you have a baby with you? You've already got the microphone, so I guess that means you get to start. So ready, set, go. Oh. You've got another microphone. Is it green or red?
It's green now.
There you go, yay! Okay, who are you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nikki Leingang. I'm a community representative for Congressman Keith Ellison. I work on environmental issues for him. Zero waste has been one of his big policy initiatives over the last couple years. And so I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how you can best communicate with your elected officials.
Hi, everyone. My name is Halston Sleets. I am Mayor Betsy Hodges' policy aide for environmental justice and sustainability. Prior to that, I was working with Hennepin County in environment and energy. Janice asked me to participate, so thanks. And again, I will to echo the importance of contacting your elected officials and also maybe discuss some EJ if I get the opportunity. So yeah.
Are we all just can we all say it's just EJ? Yeah, that's cool. All right, cool. A star is born.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Winmore. This is Luna, my daughter. I'm here to talk about how you as a... Hello? Okay. How you as a regular individual can make change, and you can do it while you're a mother or a father or a caretaker. So we'll talk about that, especially particularly testifying to your city council members.
I'm Evan Holmes, and I testified from the Senate committee, and I'm here to talk about how easy it was to do that, and anybody can do it.
I'm Janice Swatz. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at Eureka Recycling, so that's how I'm sitting on this panel, because I was told I was going to do so. Which I was like, cool. Going to talk about talking to your neighbors and kind of starting out organizing with that.
Cool. My name is Patty O'Keefe. I'm an organizer with Minnesota 350. We work on climate issues, and we've been doing a lot of deep canvassing lately and talking with people on greater Minnesota who don't necessarily agree with us on this issue, and trying to figure out how to talk with people who may not completely align. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that with Janice later.
I'm Diana Kennedy, and a long time ago in a previous life, I helped launch Eureka Recycling and was raised by Susan Hubbard and Tim Brownell, next to Alex Danovich and a few others. And for many years, I sat on panels like this because I was told to. And then I left, had kids, and became a regular person. So now I'm just a regular person out in the world doing zero waste. And I'm here today probably because last year I worked with a group of people to bring about a decision by the Minneapolis School District to take tire mulch out of all of the playgrounds in the schools. And I'm here, oh, thanks. Yes, I know, it feels like a victory, doesn't it? I'm gonna talk to you a little bit later about how to do that and what's really hard about that.
I'm Pat Schonecker, and I'm going to be talking about how I stayed at this. They wanted me to address how to stay at it for the long haul.
That is fantastic. So I'm going to actually hand this microphone over this way because, and I have no idea if that works or not. Just hand that one to the baby. But because I meant the one that didn't work, but whatever. Because what I really want is I want to try and build this as a conversation because, yes, we brought you each up here because you have specific experiences and expertise in areas, but you all have worked on this in a variety of different ways and have things to share. And or you might also have very good questions to help build on what somebody else says. So I don't want to turn this into just each person speaking. So if at any point any of you have a point to jump in on or a question to follow up, I really want to encourage you all to do that. And again, we'll open it all up for folks to really ask questions about a variety of different things. I did promise we were going to start though at the very individual person-on-person level, which is sort of where you all alluded to you were going to talk about. So I kind of want to start that. You mentioned with MN 350 that you all have started doing some conversation pieces on how to talk to people, maybe people who either you don't know how they feel about these things, or maybe you know that they probably are hostile about these things. So can you give us just a quick snapshot of how do you start that, or how do you train folks, or what should we be thinking about in terms of that very basic interaction?
Yeah. So I will say that we just piloted this program starting after the election, so we haven't been at it for very long. And what a deep canvas is basically we are going out and knocking on doors outside of the Twin Cities, and talking with people and trying to have a values-based conversation where we are connecting with them around the issue of climate change with the goal of ultimately shifting public opinion. And that is a very different conversation than if you are, knocking on a door and, raising money or asking people to vote for a political candidate. It's a little bit of a different methodology. And what we have learned from our limited experience thus far and has confirmed what we know already from a lot of what social science research tells us, that people are oftentimes less moved by being fed facts alone, and are more likely to move on an issue, to connect with an issue, if they feel moved personally and emotionally, or if they are able to connect for themselves a direct experience that they've had to a broader issue. So we're out there and trying to do that and talk with people about climate change. And a lot of times that looks like modeling kind of vulnerability and being able to tell your story about why an issue matters to you, or how you've been impacted, or somebody you know or love has been impacted, or why you care about the issue, to be able to kind of get into that like deeper below the surface conversation that can help really move the needle for people and how they think about an issue. So I guess I would say a lot of times that's just telling a story, kind of a narrative-based approach.
Does anybody up here have an example of that where they did that, where you talked to somebody and just sort of had a conversation? Like, I imagine you didn't just, hey, are you down with EJ, or like, I don't know, how do you start? What does anybody have an example of a time that they did this?
Oh, okay, I'll try. So really what this is like baseline organizing, right? And so like Patty said, you really want to try to connect with somebody on their level. And you might come into it with an agenda of moving the needle.
Do you want to say what this thing that sprung up behind you is?
Right. So we call this a supporter spectrum, right? Spectrum of allies. And so you can see that there's kind of like these different pieces of the pie, categories of where you might be talking to somebody who might fall into one of these categories. And so just to kind of run through the definitions we have, and sort of to lay it out, we have active opposition here on the far right, passive opposition, neutral, passive allies and active allies. And you can see the arrows. We want to try to move people along the spectrum to get as close to the active allies section as possible. But you might, of course, be starting with somebody who might fall into the active opposition or the passive opposition. So if you find yourself talking to somebody who's in this camp, again, you really want to try to connect with them on what they care about. Because more than likely, I really wouldn't imagine somebody say, like, I'm not down with environmental justice, right? Like, because environmental justice encapsulates so many things. It's economics, it's race and gender justice, it's the environment, it's education, it's healthcare. There's all these different things inside of environmental justice or zero waste. And so you really want to just try to dig down and see where you can find that connection with somebody, and then move them along the spectrum to hopefully come along with you and find, and they'll mostly find out that they're on a journey into environmental justice. Maybe they discover something about themselves or about this issue that they might say, oh, I never really thought about it that way, but that really makes sense to me. And so that's the goal you want to get to.
I'm just curious, does anybody up here, again, I'm just trying to think about if folks here are thinking about how to take some of these things home. I don't know, any best practices, tips or tricks of how you start to have these conversations in maybe a less sort of, you probably don't want to just start it out with like, I would like to have a conversation with you.
You want to be like familiar with it.
All right, so I'll use the playgrounds as an example. So I was standing next to, is that on?
Yeah,
I gotta get close.
going.
I was standing next to a playground and I realized it had tire mulch. I'd worked for Eureka for 15 years. I knew that was a really stupid idea. And I knew kind of that like I was gonna have to work on that. And I myself had to kind of engage in this conversation with myself first. Like, am I neutral to this? No. Am I a passive ally? Like, I think it's a bad idea? Yeah. Am I willing to take leadership and do something? Oh, actually, yes. Now I'm going to put my kid in front of Frozen 3 times in one day so that I can actually like do something on this issue, which happened. And if you know me, you know that's weird that I would make that compromise, but I became very much an active ally in my own caring about getting this playground stuff cleaned up. So the very first thing really to do is to figure out who my audiences were, right? To really figure out, like, all parents everywhere, that's really hard. That's not gonna happen. And I started really, like, I did a lot of research in front of my computer, just me and my computer, and I actually found a woman, and I have to say this because Pat Schonecker is sitting next to me, a woman who was ahead of me on this and was already really trying to take some leadership on this issue, Nancy Doyle Brown, and she had really cut her teeth on pesticides in schools, which was work that Pat Schonecker pioneered in this town. And she had taken up what Pat had started and had worked, and then she took up the playground issue. So you do never know what small issue you work on, what someone else will then later take and run with it. And like, really, Pat deserves the credit for having no tires in playgrounds in Minneapolis as of next summer because of what she started. So there you go. It works like that. So I mean, it's hard because you have to keep that balance of like, this is so big, or, oh my God, this just is so insignificant. Playgrounds, how's that gonna change the world? Well, it does. You just do what you can do. So I decided playgrounds was it, and I was gonna do it. Pick your audience. I couldn't talk to every single parent. I couldn't go to every single PTO. I didn't want to. So I figured out who was making the decisions. And I figured out where they were on the spectrum, right? The first community I really wanted to organize was school board members. Because if I could get them organized and have them make the decision, it could just be over without having to talk to anybody else. It's fast. I like it. It's quick. Gets right to it, right? Turns out we needed a few more people than that, right? There was an election. The school board election turned out to be important. We needed some candidates to step in and get rid of some people who weren't going to make the right decision for us. So then you need more people voting for those people. So, you kind of find that, but it can't be everybody. You've got to get really smart. And we say the word strategic and then people panic like, I'm not strategic. You are. Your time is valuable. Who really is making the decisions? That's the first group of people you need to figure out where they are on the spectrum. And if you have a lot of opposition, it's going to take you longer. If you have a lot of passive allies, you could get it done faster, right? And then as the thing evolves, you learn more about where people are on that spectrum for real. And I think you talk to those people differently. I'm a very passionate speaker. That serves me well in a room like this. Y'all like it. Not everybody likes to be talked to in a passionate way, right? Especially by a woman, by the way, because you can be dubbed very emotional. And then as soon as you're a mother and you start talking in a passionate way, you're hysterical. Right? You're just a very, you must have seen something on the news that just made you so worried about your child. Someone actually said that to me in a room. Someone who knew that I had worked at Eureka, knew what my professional background was, and was able to dismiss what I was saying because they knew I was a mother, which I hadn't even said out loud in the room yet. And so you have to kind of know your audience too. And I think of this all the time when I think about the people who are speaking on behalf of Black Lives Matter. And sometimes we as white people have a really hard time hearing all that passion. But that's because it's their visceral experience of it, and they are charged up and they know more than you know about it. So you have to just stop and listen to that. So if you're hearing passionate speak, really try hard to shut up and listen to it, right? I'm not kidding. Like, you really have to work hard. And there were people that needed to just really listen to what I had to say. Now, if you know it and you're in a campaign, you can actually use that to your advantage. I tone it down. I get real quiet, kind of extremely reasonable when I'm talking to people who are kind of in this neutral place, particularly if they're on the school board. I don't come across this excited. I just kind of take it back a notch. And I don't mind doing that, despite the fact that if I was fighting a feminist fight that day, it'd be a different conversation. So that's all I want to say.
So I think this is so interesting because we're starting to get to this piece about the social coalition building and organizing and sort of how you do that. And that is a big part of that is moving people along this. And you're starting to speak to some of the strategy around that. I think that there's probably a lot of folks in this room who are thinking right now about the people that they know, maybe the people that they tried to get to come to this morning and we're like, ooh, Saturday at 9:00, are you nuts? But that's sort of a really important question is if you have folks who you think, yeah, they're these passive ally types, like they get it, they know why this is important. Actually moving them to action, that's tricky. So does anybody, what's a hook or what's an example of a thing that you can say or a practice or something that you've done that you've seen, this helped me, not just for myself, but get somebody else, move them from that passive to a little more active place? Do you have, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think that the easiest way to do that is by making it as easy as possible for people to get involved. If you provide somebody with an action item that they can do, and then you make that action item as accessible as possible, people are going to be way more willing to do it than if you just give them like a vague direction. So saying like, call your city council member and request that they support Eureka Recycling's contract to process Minneapolis's recyclables. Like that is, you're gonna give, you gotta make the call, this is what you say. That's something that they can easily envision. But if you say, fight for zero waste in Minneapolis, people don't really know what that looks like. So I think providing people the information that can, in a narrative form, using statistics or numbers in a more in relative terms. So when we're talking about environmental justice issues in North Minneapolis, saying kids in North Minneapolis have a higher rate of lead poisoning than in Flint, Michigan. That is a statistic, but it's something that hits somebody in the stomach a lot more than just saying what the per capita rate of lead poisoning is in that area. And then from there, then it's contact your county and contact your county commissioner, ask them to put more money into the lead abatement programs that they're getting grants to do.
So very tangible things. Award winner Pat, I see you grabbed the microphone. Yes.
Well, when I started the cleaning project in the city buildings, I think you build relationships up with people, and I really was attentive to. I was working with all the janitors in the city buildings on recycling, and they would have complaints that the truck smashed something on their door, or they didn't like the placement of the bins or whatever, and I would go down and meet with them and address it. And I established relationships, with the building manager of the City Hall Annex, and he was telling me that he was upset that he couldn't get the Public Works Department to turn off their CAD computer monitors, and that was wasting a lot of energy. And so we really worked at that. We went to Lawrence Liverpool Laboratories and found out would that really wreck the computers, because at one time people thought turning on and off their monitors was going to cause problems and expense. And so we found out it didn't and wrote a letter, and we got the mayor to sign the letter. I wrote the letter, the mayor signed it, and we sent it around to people, and they turned it off. And in 1 year, they saved $30,000 in energy costs. The other thing was when we started the cleaning project, it was the janitors, because I worked with them and I had a relationship with them. They showed me rashes on their arms from the cleaning products. They showed me when they were cleaning the terrazzo floors that they were getting headaches, and one of them was close to retirement but feeling like he would have to retire because he just couldn't do the work anymore. And so I had heard there was this project to start safe cleaning products, found out serendipitous. This is what I want to say. If you want to do something, it's in your heart to do it, you're moved by it, do it and take small steps, and allies will come out of the woodwork to help you. And that's what happened for me. I found out this woman in California had already started a non-toxic product. I tried to call the chemist and find out what was in their product. Oh, it's proprietary. And I mean, it was terrible for me because I was a person who almost flunked high school chemistry. So I was like, how can I do this project? But anyway, when I called this Debbie Raphael in California, she said, the product's made in Minnesota. And when I went and talked to that woman, she was running a retail store. I'm going on a long time, but anyway. And she was really discouraged, and she was like, I don't think this is going to. I said, you will make money, I guarantee you, if you take on this project and you got our city going and it was successful. You would get funding from the state, this would revitalize your business. And she bought it. And she joined us, and I said, but you have to train the janitors on how to use it because they believed it was going to cost them more elbow grease. So anyway, after we did it and the product was successful and it helped the janitors, then I thought, well, now how do we get all the janitors in the city and in the county and that to hear this? And I thought, janitors have to speak to janitors, not me. And because they speak the language, they know the issues. And so that's what we did. And we went to the schools, with the superintendent of the schools, we went to the custodians, and we made big changes. We changed the cleaning, purchasing products for the state of Minnesota, which meant mental hospitals, state hospitals, schools. It was a $3.5 million contract. But you start small, and you don't know who's going to be your ally and who's going to come and who's going to help you and give you just what you need to know when you don't know it at all.
And there's such an interesting piece. Yes, that's a big one. Yeah. Because I think also we often think about social change as a straight line, not necessarily an always forward momentum line. Like maybe you move 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I think part of what you're talking about that's very interesting to me and asking the whole panel are these moments when you learn something that changes slightly the way that you would go. That, right now you think, yeah, we absolutely should change from, in this case, like this cleaning product to this cleaning product, or, we should move from, I'm sure at some point there were people who thought, yeah, we just need to sort of like move people to recycling or like backyard composting. But you learn things about people's individual experiences or how the system works that maybe you think, okay, actually, this is more complex than that. So I'm wondering if there's anybody, is there a time that you can think of where somebody, you said, oh, I have this thing that I really think is an important step forward. Somebody said, actually, and then you had to sort of reimagine then how you move forward and how do you sort of grapple with that? Because that's another piece I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, yeah, I'll go home and somebody might come at me with something I was totally unprepared for.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so this isn't something I struggled with, but relaying the messages of climate justice and how it's not about polar bears, it's about the disproportionate impact that climate change is going to have on people of color, specifically Black and brown people in low-income neighborhoods. You have to change. That's a social change that's going to happen, but again, you have to reframe it and put a person's face on it to really have people begin to care about it and understand the impact that's going to have. So that's been I've switched a lot of my messaging in that. And again, relating that to environmental justice issues, we have to talk about the impact these have on people's lives. Not just about money and air pollution, but health, death rates. It's real for a lot of people, whether you want to see it or not. Facts are great, but narratives are narratives paint that picture for you. So attaching a human face and a person to a problem has been, it's sad, but it's been one of the most effective ways in which I have been able to drive my messages. And using passion in how I talk about these issues is what fuels me. So I will always go into a room being the angry Black person of color, and that's fine, and I accept that. But like, this is the work that needs to, it's fueled by my energy and by my passion. So I never want to quiet the voice of people's lives and my responsibility to fix what's wrong, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that oftentimes we think about social change, or we have an idea about the way the world should work, and people shy away from actually taking that on because they think they have to have the ironclad key messages and they're going to have to convince every single person, and they have to be like a lawyer doing closing arguments, and you pull out that one piece of secret information that wins the day. Like, we have this idea that it's this craftiness and this skill of negotiation or something that actually I don't even possess. It really is more about sort of speaking your truth, speaking the truth of other people you know, and then listening. So Pat does a great job of, you hear it in the way she talks. Oh, and then I was listening to the janitors, and she had to be willing to go then and do a ton more research about computer monitors, which she probably didn't really want to do or maybe know how to do, but then she did it, and then she has a whole group of people then who are with her. It's like you have to allow this space for there to be evolution of your issue, which feels you have to let go of some control and some ego to do that. And you have to be willing to kind of like follow that piece along and still lead it and drive it, which is sort of this nice, funny dance that you have to do. I think that it is... It is about staying focused. It's about, I think oftentimes we spend too much time trying to convince everybody, and we spend our time arguing. And actually, if you're going to move social change, if you work at it long enough and talk to enough people, you'll find enough of people who agree with you, and you don't have to argue with the people who don't agree with you. You can actually ignore them most of the time. If you get enough people who agree with you, you can make that change, and they're out of luck. I mean, the tire industry, I didn't even talk to them when we decided to take the the tire mulch out. Now, if we want to go to the next stage of our strategy, which is to remove all crumb rubber athletic fields, then we have to start talking to soccer moms and athletic groups and the tire industry, and that's harder, but we just cut off this playground thing because it was manageable, and we spread it out enough to involve the voices of the people we were hearing, and we did go on some funny paths to get there, to get some support. And then, maybe we ante up again and go after the next one.
Yeah.
But it's not a straight line.
I want to move us along this sort of path of how to do some of this to talking. First, I want to talk about just contacting legislators, and then talk a little bit about going and doing something like testifying, which sounds like the part I imagine people are thinking, I have to be somehow trained in this or whatnot. But on this contacting in the last year, your Facebook, every day it's filled with like, contact your legislators about this, contact it. And I think a lot of people are still like, I don't know what that means. Like, do I write them a letter? Do I go knock on their door? Do I have to have a special phone number? And so I'm just curious, you're there, you're in the office. Like, what is it actually, does it just mean sort of contacting, and what is effective? Like, what should we spend our time doing if there's something that we care about? And what are the things that you're like, yeah, that's okay. You don't need to like you don't need to like the Facebook post. That doesn't, I don't know, maybe that does matter.
If you look at Keith's Facebook page, about half of the comments are from people that don't live in the district and are just vile racists. Commenting on a Facebook page for like most elected officials probably isn't going to do a whole lot for them.
Yeah.
I think that the best way to get engaged in what your elected officials are doing are calling their offices and going to the events that they're hosting. That said, we do have so many different levels of government, and it's kind of hard to even figure out who's making what decision and who has power in which scenario. For something like waste, the federal government has does some amount of oversight for recycling and management of hazardous waste. But like Lynn mentioned at the start of the day, most of our waste policy is managed on the county level. But that said, the state has their own solid waste management plan that you can comment on County has that, the city has it, and Halston was just assembling Minneapolis's zero waste plan, so I'll let you talk about that. But it's important to figure out what you're trying to, what you want to happen, like what your ask is going to be. And the more specific your ask is, the more likely it is to actually have an impact. So don't just call to an elected official and say, I want you to work on zero waste. Figure out what you can, what action steps they could take. If you live outside of Minneapolis, like in Betty McCollum's district or Eric Paulson's district, anybody else's district, like they could sponsor a zero waste bill if they wanted to, and that could potentially be a thing that you could ask for. When it comes to local elected officials, always start with the people that actually represent you, but then look at who are the people that are leading the committees that are making the decisions that you care about. In Minneapolis, I don't live in Kevin Reich's ward, but he is the chair of the Transportation and Public Works Committee. And so when we were working to try to get the city to choose Eureka to process our recyclings, like he was one of the people that we targeted all the time.
So can I think a big piece of this contacting folks, and I'd be interested in both of you, is people think, sure, I contact, but they've already made up their minds. Like we elected the person who said they were going to do this. And so that ship has already sailed. It's already, so I guess I'm curious, when does the lever get pushed one way or the other is it that anything, like if you got 1 million calls on, X issue, that would push you to do that? I think a lot of people think, I just don't even know when it matters.
I think there's always a process, right? And a lot of our residents aren't aware of what that process is. But remember, pressure is important, and putting pressure on people who you elect is important. And I want people to feel like they have the agency to do that. I just think there's always a manner in which things that have already been set in stone can be changed. There's power in numbers, there's power in people. And again, I think the most effective way, just because I work in the mayor's office, writing letters, I know a lot of people don't do it, but we have a really great system where we mark the date on which a letter comes into the office and how long it takes for us to respond. And then directly having that piece of paper is wonderful for me, that I can reference on my calendar to see that when I'm being responsive or when I'm not and I need to, really respond to someone. Probably, I'm sure we get, a couple hundred emails a day, maybe 25 phone calls a day. It's a lot to keep up with, but having letters, and within the letter, I think it's important to state the reason you're writing, an introduction to yourself, being brief, but being to the point, being firm, and again, writing based on experiences and stories, and using that passion is really important. Again, you're talking to people. These electeds are not higher up than anyone. They are public servants. They work for you. So remember that when you're writing, like, this is another person who I helped get into office. Therefore, they need to be held responsible by me. So I think writing letters is the most effective way. And what else do I want to say? And yeah, don't be afraid to give an ask. Have an ask ready. You may not be the only person asking that. And again, that helps us build community-based solutions once we hear from the community and the public. So
I can imagine folks potentially being nervous just about calling, their mayor or the congressperson. What if they pick up? I might have to actually talk to them. Versus you actually, Evan, you went and actually testified. So can you just tell us, what was that like? How did you prepare for that? Did you know exactly what you were going to say, or did you? Tell us, what was that like? What did you testify about, first of all? It's on. I think you could just talk right into it, or not.
I testified about the not allowing Minneapolis to ban plastic bags. And the reason why I testified about that is because like it has environmental impacts, the sea turtles and so many other animals just die from that. So.
And so how did you get ready to do that? Were you nervous at all? Was that?
I mean, I was nervous, but it was just the night, just that day I decided I wanted to do it, and I didn't really write much. I wrote 4 paragraphs. It was, just tiny, yeah. It wasn't that hard.
And so what was, again, if you were giving advice to these folks, if they were saying, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, but it seems really scary, what would you say to the folks?
It's really not. It's really easy. There's not many people in the room. It's just you have the floor, and it's not that hard, and it's just nice. It's not that hard.
I do want to, that is brilliant. I want to, again, sort of open this up a little bit more in terms of, if we've heard a little bit about the impact of calling folks. What is just the impact generally of doing something like testifying, or does that matter? How does that matter?
Can I talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Again, for me, the universe supports you in what your goals are, I really believe. And I spoke about our cleaning project at a Recycling Association of Minnesota meeting, and the person sitting next to me was Senator Jean Wagenius, and she said, we have to talk afterwards. And she assembled a group that wanted to work on the same thing about getting pesticides and cleaning products out. And she and Senator Jane Rainham, we formed a committee, and a group, a lot of people came together and helped. And I mean, she would call, and this is before the internet, she would call me at 11 o'clock at night and say, what does this mean? And what is this? And can you look this up? And can you find this? And supply me with this information. And I mean, I'm like, oh.
Did she not have a legislative aid? Were you just, you were?
I think, that we were working like that. And I'm sure she had a legislative aid, and sometimes timelines just, and so I would drop everything and try to find her the information she wanted or whatever. But we then passed this Janet Johnson Right to Know law, which meant that parents would be notified if pesticides were used in the schools. And a lot of kids were really reactive to pesticides and would have seizures and all kinds of things. And it seems like a small law, but it made a difference. But it's again, for me, it was following the thread. Just everything's networked together and you follow the thread.
Did you want to jump in here? Yeah.
So we definitely can make an impact. You're one person, but when we're a collective, we can make such an influence to policy change. So the other thing is your council members really want to hear from you. They're public servants, and they want to hear what the community wants. And so when there's not people there to speak up, they end up making the decision, and sometimes it's the wrong decision for the community. So absolutely know that you have a lot of impact, and your words are very important. And being present and being there is really important.
Okay, I want to open it up for a few audience questions. So if you have a question for anybody or generally in our pay, yes, I will come back there. Although that's healthy to get that lunch burned off. All right, here we go. Good. You have to get real comfortable with me, though.
No problem.
Tethered.
Hi, we're all here from Minneapolis Community Technical College. And the last couple of years, we had an alliance with the Urban Farm Collective on campus. We would collect composting from the various restaurants and stuff on the campus and bring it to their urban garden that they had on campus. And then they would compost it and use the soil. Well, the school sold off or is in the process of selling off that 10,000 square foot community garden. So we're working on trying to get the school to restore the space that we had so that we can continue composting on campus while the Urban Farm Collective is negotiating with a new home, right? And so I'm seeing a lot of the ideas you said about seeking allies and working together and figuring out where people are on the spectrum, but I'm hoping this will be sort of a useful case study to speak directly about how to do that process, right? What sort of things are we going to be looking for while we try to convince the administration to set up a dozen compost bins in an area that's not the community garden, somewhere else?
So is part of your question then, maybe are there examples or things in terms of making that case that you can bring to those?
Yeah, and what kind of tools, aside from what you were talking about earlier, should we be using directly?
All right,
So I think that some of the most effective strategies is coalition building. At MCTC, there's such an amazing community that is based around so many different interests. I mean, I know that the artist community is really involved in a lot of other aspects of campus life. And so making the case to get other organizations interested in the effort that you're pushing, so that the administration sees that it's not just one niche student group of maybe like 10 members or so, but it's actually like that the whole student body wants this. It'd be awesome to have like the student government pass a resolution in support of it, talk to your city council member and have them voice to the administration that this is an action that they'd support. Like you don't have to get just like one, there's not always just one person that you have to convince. You can convince your whole student body that this is something good and the administration will then go along with it.
Can I add, piggybacking off of Nikki, you mentioned like artists. So finding ways to like show what you're doing in like different methods. So using art, using music, using video, maybe you can like make a quick video about how the compost actually works and like show that it's a very valuable thing to have on campus and that you're gonna need the space to do so. So just like finding like different mediums to also tell your story.
And I might just back up a whole step. You might not need to convince anybody. The administration might already be on board with your idea. Do you know? So you can go to your administration or your elected officials, like we went to our school board members before we even had our plan in place, and just sat and had a conversation with them and listened to them. We said, hey, look, we don't really like the fact that there's tire mulch here. What do you think about that? Have you heard anything about that? Do you have any questions about that? What questions would you have if we came to you with a proposal to take it out? What concerns would you have? And we listened. And I literally made a phone call to each and every single school board member, had coffee, had beer with one of them, which was very enlightening. I got the whole lowdown on how the whole thing goes down, and we had our whole political strategy right there, right? Like you don't have to assume that you're in opposition to the people who are holding that decision already. And you don't have to have all of it together before you start talking to them. Now, you don't have to pretend that you like it if they do seem like they're in opposition to you. And I like to give people heads up and say, well, I'm coming after it. So just so you know, I'll be back here with a plan in a little while, and we can talk more about your opposition then. And so, I think you have to remember, like, they are your first community, the decision makers. Know who they are, get a sense of where they're at, then build all of that. Go as crazy as you can go to build up support if you are in that fight, but you might not even be in it.
Okay, if you have a question, raise your hand. I will come to it. Yes, right there. Yes, please stand up. I was supposed to be asking people to stand up, and I forgot.
So at what point during your social movement that you got to the point where you realized that what you were doing was working? What was your aha moment? Was it the fact that you found an ally? Was it something that you had actually said got echoed back to you? What was that thing that you knew that what you were doing was right and that people were listening to you and other people had already been talking about it?
Well, for us, it's when the election happened and 3 new school board members got in who had promised that they would be removing the tire mulch, and we had the votes. And then it was just a matter of scrambling and doing the plan. But I really think before that, it was when we had an opportunity through an entirely different process that was happening at the city of Minneapolis, a really poor process, actually, about examining this issue through a citizens advisory committee. But it did give us a chance to sit down with a man, Lee Setter, who was working at the school district, and we were able to share a lot of information on late nights, just like back and forth. And we learned a lot about where the schools were at. Like, it was an invaluable relationship that we would not have been able to create if it hadn't been this process that we were sort of asked to participate in because we'd gotten Cam Gordon's attention. So, and there are multiple victories. And even now we wonder if we've won. They hired their consultant and they're going about it, and how will they do it? Are they going to go to the priority schools that we asked them to go to, or are they going to just go to the squeaky wheels? The priority schools for us are those of the neighborhoods that have the most toxic load. And so those tend to not be the neighborhoods where the people who are working on the campaign were from. So we're holding their feet to their fire on that, and that's another thing. So I don't know, we're still holding our breath. It's like lots of little victories, lots of little moments.
Building off of that, like the election piece, it didn't just it wasn't necessarily all down because it inspired people to speak out. So it kind of helped this whole zero waste thing. So for me, I started watching the news every night, and
I'm so sorry.
It might not have been helpful, but it moved me, and I think it moved a lot of other people to make a difference. So that's part of like it just, yeah, helped.
So I testified for organized trash collection in St. Paul in favor of it. And I think that, thank you. Come on, guys. And I knew that I had the support because it's about relationship building and seeing who is in the room with you, testifying with you. So that helps know that there is a voice for it. And then the other thing is it got passed, so it's going to move forward. They're going to figure out how to do contracts and things like that. So when you advocate for policy change and can hear at a council meeting, you can see where it's going, and so that's how I knew that it was going forward.
And I'll just say really quickly that this may seem like a little bit of a bummer, but I think when sometimes a signal that you're actually doing the right thing and you're on the right track is when decision makers try to delegitimize your efforts, or you see organized opposition to the campaign that you're working on, which has happened on a lot of the fossil fuel divestment student campaigns that I've supported over the last few years. Once they stop meeting with you and kind of saying, yeah, let's meet and just have conversation and open dialogue. Once it gets past that point, and they get serious is when okay, we've actually built up some power here that they feel like needs to be challenged.
Okay, we have time for maybe one last question, so I will circle back over there. Sorry, camera.
Oh, this is interesting. Okay. First and foremost, I just want to give a huge shout out to the young youth awesomeness that's on this panel. First, we got to do that first. Everyone's like oohing and ahhing in the background. I was like, no, they're brilliant. You just got to give them space to speak. So here's my question. What work are you doing where you're connecting with more youth to connect them to a lot of the issues? There's got to be a ton of kids who probably don't know that what they play on every day is toxic. So how are you working with youth in all your work and giving them voice on these issues?
Well, even at school, it's just really small for me. Like in my friend group, in 5th grade, I asked a friend if he wanted to MC with me at assembly to talk about raising money for helping animals in the rainforest, and it just makes a difference. Anything you do, you can. Even if it's small, I don't do anything big. I go to a protest, that's small. If I go to something like that, it's small, but it makes a difference still, and anybody can do it. It's just different people's perspective. Even me, I'm a kid, but it doesn't really stop me. No.
Okay, I want to spend the last about 5-10 minutes we have here going through. You all have been terrifically inspiring, but I want to go through several of the what do we do? What are the actual very tangible things that are on the immediate horizon, on the farther horizon, and ask you both about where are they right now, and then what are the action steps that folks here might be doing. And so the one that's I've already touched on and I've already gotten some advice on is this plastic bags piece, which. Well, maybe I would just ask, can you just give us sort of I know the city of Minneapolis was looking at putting a fee on plastic bags, and then there were some moves at the state legislature, and then the city decided to send it back to staff. Where is that? Where might we expect it to go? What are we looking at with that particular item?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm just being completely honest. I don't know. I know it went back for another staff direction, which is pretty watered down based on the way it was voted for previously. So I don't know what council's thinking, and I can't speak to a council process, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is the city of Minneapolis has a current draft plan of our city's zero waste plan. I'm plugging something.
Yeah, please.
The city's zero waste plan, and we are extending that engagement period and that comment period. It ended yesterday, however, we are extending that to October 1st. So please, please go online. Read the plan, read the executive summary, comment, send me an email. All the information is at minneapolismn.gov/zero waste.
Well, and I wanted to ask about the plastic bag, and we'll I don't know, we'll repeat that several more times and put it out places. But the plastic bag piece, because originally it was sort of just framed as the city wants to put like a 5 or 10 cent fee on 5-cent fee on all bags. I've heard since then some different ways of maybe doing it, in terms of maybe it's that you give people a discount if they bring their own bag, or maybe it's that there is this fee, but instead of going to the city, it goes back to the grocery stores, or some different pieces like that. So all of which is just to say, it seems like it's still an open conversation of how it'll happen. And so this is one of those places where it seems like it's really valuable for folks to go and talk to their neighbors and talk to their council people about where is this going, what's happening with this generally. So you plugged the zero waste plan. Is there any other sort of city things in Minneapolis that we should be keeping an eye out for? There's not an election or anything. Okay, good. So
No. Please feel free to comment. I live in St. Paul and I work in Minneapolis, but that's a secret. So it's just. But yeah, please feel free. If you do see an issue or a concern, you do have a concern. Any concern is valid, and I want to make sure we're being responsive to everything. So yeah. And sign up for organics if you do live in Minneapolis.
what about in St. Paul? Does anybody want to speak? Yeah, you want to speak for St. Paul? What's going on in St. Paul? It's
Even something like the forward plan, like it's your perspective, but still you can speak out on it. You can testify. You can do anything you want because it's your choice, because it's in your neighborhood and it's not the governor's choice because it's your neighborhood and yeah. I mean, it's right next to a national park, so it's really hard to know, like, yeah.
You grabbed a mic too? Did you have?
Yeah, I was going to talk about organized trash collection. So there will be some more feedback, I think, from residents that the council will be looking for. But there's also the sustainable to-go packaging that I'm sure Megan can talk about. But St. Paul is looking to remove styrofoam and non-recyclable materials and non-compostable materials for restaurants and to-go packaging. And they need people for a hearing that's coming up next month.
Do you want to come on up here? Do you want to grab a microphone and/or chair? Do you want this chair?
No,
Here, you
okay.
have this chair. I'm the MC. I can just walk around. Here you go. Yay! Oh, okay. Well, do you have something on the two cities, or
lots of information? Yes, definitely. There's lots coming up really in the near future in terms of both cities.
Okay.
Mahir, do you want to come up here too?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. I should have introduced you both. I apologize. I was in my script and I just got so caught up in it.
Yeah,
So,
it's a very good. We segued it very well.
yes, this is completely seamless.
Really?
Do you want to just say who you are really quickly? Introduce yourselves.
Sure. Hello. Oh no.
Just share. Yeah.
Hi. Can you hear me? Oh yeah, great. Hi. So I'm Mahir Saru. I work for Congressman Keith Ellison as his legislative assistant. Do a wide portfolio, but energy and environment. So honored to help work on his zero waste bill that you all heard him talk about a little bit this morning.
So, and I'll just jump in because I as soon as you said plastic bags, my ears perk up immediately because definitely played a big role. We kind of took our first foray, and that's how I met Evan this year. Was we ended up testifying in the same Senate hearing against the preemption, which is when the state says, nope, the cities, you can't make decisions for yourself, especially around solid waste issues, even though you have to deal with that all the time. The state, so Minneapolis passed a bring your own bag ordinance in 2016 that had a ban on plastic bags and a fee on all the other types of bags. This 2 days before that was set to go into effect, the state preempted the ban on plastic bags, but did not preempt the fee on plastic bags. So Minneapolis in August, it's when the state says, that a city can't do something that they wanted to do.
The state authority
The
preempts
state authority
the,
preempts
the local authority.
right, and so they said no city could do a prohibition on plastic bags.
So where is what
So
what
in
are the levers now? if
Yeah,
folks are
yeah.
passionate
So in
about
August, they Councilmember Gordon was working to bring up the fee so that we would Minneapolis would just charge a fee on all bags, trying to work within that, because really that's getting back to the 71 bags. When we reduce all of the material that, sure, plastic bags can be recycled, but 100 billion bags are made every year in the United States and less than 5% of them are recycled. So when we're really talking about a product that we need to take a policy aspect on it, not just recycle as much as we possibly can, plastic bags are a great one. And so the state, when they were working on it, they said, oh, well, we can't have different laws for different cities. But we don't necessarily agree with that, and we think the city should have the right to make their own rules around fees or bans for problem materials. And so when they were working in August to make a fee for all bags, sadly, there was a substitution initiated. This is what Halstead was referring to, a substitution to send it back to staff and to get more input, which we're not opposed to that. That's important, but there was a huge community process when the original ban went into effect, but didn't. But then the state took over that process. So hopefully very soon after the new council is in place, we'll be taking action on that again.
What about in St. Paul? Because we already heard a little bit about this.
Very soon.
Styrofoam was a piece. So
yeah, yep. So the Sustainable To-Go Packaging Ordinance, which is a good name, I guess, but it's very similar to Minneapolis's Green To Go, where all to-go materials would be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. So it's not just about a ban on a certain material, but it's about making sure that we can recycle or compost anything that we walk out with a leftovers bag or takeout. And everyone who lives in St. Paul, I'm just gonna do some accountability stuff here. If you live in St. Paul, write down October 4th on your calendar, 5:30 p.m. Public hearing. Evan's gonna be there. I already got word. And it's a public hearing in favor of, we are asking you to come out, testify in favor of this ordinance that would help us get closer to zero in St. Paul. So great opportunity to use some skills you learned here today. And we really think that would help St. Paul get to a definitely zero waste, but it's an equitable, more just practice for the city. So.
And is there stuff, so we did the two cities, is there stuff on the federal level that we should be, things that aren't making us panic on the federal level?
I mean, besides for panicking,
Yeah.
so like Congressman Ellison mentioned this morning, he has authored a bill called the Zero Waste Development and Expansion Act of 2017. It essentially authorizes the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency's administrator, to authorize grants for solid waste prevention and reduce and reuse and recycling programs across the country. And what's really exciting about this is, politics aside, what's going on nationally, while it's scary sometimes, but there's also, an opportunity to be bold, because why not? Especially in this moment, what can we do? We saw what happened with hurricanes all across the country. How are we actually combating climate change? But oftentimes when we talk about what are we actually doing to combat climate change, we forget about one of the most important ways to do that is dealing with our waste. And how are we doing it in a way that not only prioritizes social justice and talks about this disproportionality of like climate change and its health impacts, but also talking about like solutions to that, which is like why having this summit and having, you know, a hub like Eureka Recycling to talk about zero waste on sort of a municipal level is so important. And specifically within the bill, it's exciting because it not only, you know, there's this grants program and it talks about what are we doing for capital investment grants for infrastructure. You know, I know right now we're talking a lot about like, what are we doing to like revamp our infrastructure? Well, infrastructure doesn't just mean like more roads and bridges, and it doesn't even mean more like light rail or metro, but it also means like what are we doing on infrastructure on like a sense of sustainability. And so that's really like how we can progress and like move forward this zero waste model. But also like how are we doing that in terms of like outreach. I know earlier there was a teacher that mentioned, what are we doing to talk about education. Actually, Janice and I had the honor of, it was last year, to go talk to an elementary school in North Minneapolis around the garbage incinerator, and to talk about, how do we actually connect this like value system of like why should we care about wanting to move towards zero waste, right? Like why should we care about composting? Why should we care about recycling? Well, like if we do more of that, that means less waste goes into a garbage burner. That means less toxins go into the environment. That means that the level of asthma could go down. People can actually breathe clean air. And like think about, what are stories that you could share of like family that or people that you may know that have trouble breathing or don't have access to a lot of these important aspects of how to actually move towards a sustainable future. So it's it's HR 1034.
Wow, they were fighting to see who could get it out faster. So, okay, we're just about out of time. I want to make sure we got to, and if we've gotten to all the really key things, we didn't actually get to pin you down, Pat, on like the sustaining this for the long haul, which was supposed to be your whole piece. But I was wondering if you could. So we're all so inspired and excited right now, and we're surrounded by a group of people who all get this, and now we're all going to go back out into the, for some reason, 92-degree heat in the middle of September, and we're gonna, yeah, exactly, and we're gonna run into all these people who are really maybe passive or maybe passive opposition. So how do you kind of keep it going? How do you keep both yourself fulfilled and passionate about this, and how do you keep taking the next step each day? What's the take-home advice for all of us?
Well, for me, it's connecting with people who have like beliefs and then really getting new ideas. And I personally, during any downtimes, I search out, since I'm a big reader, I search out the good news like Yes Magazine or some of the local papers, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, just what are strategies that people are doing, on the ground that help, that inspire you and think, and empower you and give you ideas of how you can take action. And I think you have to feed that hope. So that's what I do. I try to feed that hope through whatever means I can, through people I meet, through things I read, through projects I hear about. And then I have a husband who works nonstop for renewable energy, and that feeds my hope a lot. So you see how many different nonprofit groups, especially, and dedicated people that are working on this. That gives me hope. And I think the young people really give me hope because they get it. And they're actively working, and it's just thrilling that this young man is here today. I think he represents thousands behind him who are just really get the issues and are here to change our way of life, and I think that gives me a lot of hope.
On that incredible note, please, can we have an amazing round of applause for this amazing panel of people? Yay! Yay! Look at how they're getting. Yay! Good time! Yay! We're all gonna move off the stage. It might take a few minutes because there's a lot of us. So, so we have just a couple last things here. One of which is that one more time, we're gonna bring the cast of the Theater of Public Policy up to there was a lot of information about how to take action, what to do, and why don't we just see what trying to take action, what we should do, what the passion and energy actually looks like in improv comedy form is. So please, one last time for today, a round of applause for the Theater of Public Policy. Yay!
So I guess now that Evan's in charge of the UN, we've assembled here together as 12-year-olds, and it's our responsibility. I mean, Evan's cast a pretty big vision,
Yeah, no, listen.
So,
I was just busy playing in the playground mulch, but it wasn't there anymore, thanks to Evan.
yeah, thanks to Evan. Yeah. I was just living a life on go-gurt and no hope. And now it. I mean, let's just hope those adults don't screw it up.
Yes, Mayor, I didn't expect to actually see you here in your office. I was actually just about to step out, but
Well, you don't have time for a lowly resident, do you?
Oh, you're a resident? Well, why, come on in. I thought you were a lobbyist.
I just have just a brief list of issues here to go over with you.
You know what? I work for you.
Well, then why don't I'll hand those over to you. I've added it's a to-do list with punch-out holes. When you get through it, you can turn it to me for a free ice cream sundae in the City Hall cafeteria. So, just go ahead and change the world, all right?
I look forward to getting to work on this.
As your staffer, I'll get going.
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful.
Mom, I would just really advocate for the passage of HR 150. Lily gets a dog.
Yeah, I saw the bill that you wrote up.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
There's so many environmental benefits, scrap reduction, compost increase, love infusion.
Lily, honey, what did we talk about? Don't give her pats. Make it a personal connection. How do you feel if you get a dog?
I'm having trouble with all your facts, Lily. I'm not feeling connected to you.
43% of parents. Wait.
Yes, Lily?
When I was a child, my mother read a book to me called Clifford, the Big Red Dog. It stirred my heart and made me want to be Clifford's family.
It's working! Well, I don't know.
I'm
think
sorry, I'm just gonna stop you right there. You're sounding a little passionate.
I was actually bordering on hysterics.
Oh, you must be a father?
Yes. See,
Oh, could you just tone it down?
Yeah, tone it down.
Ooh, ish. I didn't mean to get on your nerves like
Oh,
that.
that's okay.
I think this is a very important issue.
Well, I'm bored now. I'm so bored.
I'm so tired.
You know, we gotta get in there and fight for this. Oh, no, I am not.
What is this? Targeting backwards psychology imagery?
This is
Can't we all just have a Blackberry soda? And just
Maybe
not
some-
talk about it?
You know what? We're having a potluck next week.
Ooh!
Yeah.
Chad, I know that I asked you earlier to go to prom.
Right.
And you were pretty actively
I was an active opposition.
I feel like the notes that I have left you and the variety of baked goods in your locker have moved you to possibly neutral.
I'm bordering on neutral. I'm bordering on neutral.
I'm an ally, and I would like to point out that there really are no better choices. In the no, I just mean this is an exception.
For a second there, I was choosing back towards active opposition.
I'm not a very good ally, but I'm trying.
I would love to get pushed beyond passivity. The baked goods and that I'm just not connecting and the needle for me is not moving.
Personal story. Yes, perhaps you're gluten-free.
All these plastic bags, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with them anymore.
You just put each individual pepper in each individual bag. And then put it in your fridge for it to rot faster.
And then I don't have to eat the food at all.
No! Oh, come on. If you were going to eat food, you'd probably... Wait a minute.
That didn't make any sense. If I want to eat food, I should grow it in the ground. That's an idea.
presidents of Eureka.
I just want to add an inspirational note that a lot of the panelists just talked about. But in the last year or so, as we've been out there advocating around plastic, not having plastic bags or plastic bags, or sustainable to go, we've had a lot of council people tell us that people are flying in from New York or Washington, D.C., who are lobbyists for, the manufacturers of those products, talking to them. So to Patsy's point, when that starts happening, you know that they're scared, and that means that there really is an opportunity to make change. And so to what Jennifer and Megan said, show up and talk, because our council people really want to hear it, because they're getting a lot of facts from industry and they need to hear the emotional side of it. And I just think that that's really important, and we can't be scared by industry. I just thought of this, but Lynn and I did testify at a St. Louis Park hearing a few years ago about styrofoam, and the styrofoam guy was flipping his pages all over the place and throwing stats. And we had said about styrene being having human health impacts, and he was like, well, styrene's naturally occurring. And he said it with this real authority, and one of the city council people said, so is arsenic. And I just bring that up because as much as zero waste can be complicated and there's lots of chemistry behind it, where's Pat, we can demystify it. It's much more simple than that. And don't let the big industry folks scare us into not showing up, because they can. Right. And they are right now, which means we're closer to change than we think we are.
And this is what we do all day, every day, Eureka. We work on zero waste, but you don't have to be part of this movement or to be an ally. And so we want to figure out how to keep this momentum going, how to keep these conversations going. We have what we need in our community to do this work. So let us know how today went for you. Let us know what you want to do next year. Let us know what you want to do in between now and then, most importantly, and how we can help share information.
And sign up for our mailing list. And also we do tours, which is a great gateway drug for us to talk to people about zero waste, because people love to see the Willy Wonka factory of recycling, but it gives us an opportunity. So send your neighbors our way, just from the cool see the recycling facility perspective.
Yeah. So thanks for being here. Thank you to Theater of Public Policy. That was a blast. It really made the day a lot of fun. Thanks for spending your Saturday, and everybody be well, and let's keep in touch.